They can't save us. It's gone too far. And instead of fixing the problem, they just kept making the problem worse. That's what I know. And I was told, don't do that anymore because we'll kill you.
Right, so this is deep conspiracy theory stuff by Rich Dad Poor Dad. What's his name again? I've forgotten. Robert Kiyosaki. I've pronounced that horribly wrong. Sorry, Japanese name. Nothing personal, but I don't believe a word of it. And you're about to see that he is trying to scare the crap out of you.
People started playing games, and now the game is out of control. The world's never going to be the same. I hope I'm wrong. We're going to go bankrupt. There'll probably be a new conference like the Louvre Accord or the Smithsonian Accord, and they're going to rewrite the rules of the game again. They're going to say, okay, the US dollar, you're toast.
Who's they? I do love these conspiracy theorists are wonderfully good at telling about they are going to do this and they are going to do that, but they never name them, do they?
IMF's going to jump in, China's going to jump in. But meanwhile, you and I, if you're holding dollars, you might be in serious trouble.
Just to confirm, the US dollar continues to be, by a huge margin, the reserve currency of the planet. 60% of all global reserves are in US dollars. The next is euros at 23%. Yuan, China's currency, 2.3%.
Well, he warned me that the world would change, and I didn't really understand it at the time. Some of the nasty threats I've got. You better watch out, because I criticize vaccines. And I've studied vaccines. I kind of know what they do. The primary reasons vaccines are
Does he really know what he's talking about? This guy's meant to be a financial analyst.
Cannot be sued. The drug big pharma cannot be sued for any failure of the vaccine. So the vaccine is 10 million people. The drug company, ABC, big pharma, i.e. Merck and those guys, they can't be sued. And then what they do is they produce the vaccine and then they get somebody like Trump or Obama to push it. That's what I know.
But what's that to do with the collapse of some financial system? Again, look, people, it's just another bloke telling you the end of the world and, oh, you better invest in Bitcoin. I wonder if you'll get to that soon.
That's the freedom of speech. But so is being politically correct. PC is you violate the First Amendment, the freedom of speech. Another thing that's been violated is the right to assembly. Social distancing and shutting down businesses is a violation of the First Amendment. So our rights are being ripped out of our hands.
What are you talking about?
That disturbs me. So that's what you got to be careful today, because freedom of speech is gone.
One of my tweets
no, it isn't.
New York City going
it's a
broke.
lie.
The reason New York City is going broke is much of the property in New York City is commercial real estate. I own residential real estate, so we're doing pretty good. But in commercial real estate, with everybody zooming away and at home and all this, the question is, who's going to go back to work? Who wants to pay that high price for that commercial real estate? But worst of all, what value is commercial real estate, like an office building, if you don't have workers in it?
He's got an absolutely good point here. Obviously, many organizations at the time of production, February 2025, plenty of companies are pushing people back into the office. But it doesn't make it valuable just because you make people work out of it. It makes it valuable because more work gets created there than would do at home. Yeah, he does actually have a point here.
All cities count on real estate taxes. So what you're going to see in the next few years is real estate taxes on your home. My apartments will go up. But when New York taxes those commercial high-rise buildings, more tenants will leave. So New York City is going broke. The beautiful city of Vancouver, Canada, is flat broke. That's tragic what's happening, because you have these incompetent city managers.
They may well be incompetent. I totally accept that. But one, he doesn't bring any evidence. And two, what does he expect them to have done exactly? They're incompetent because they taxed office buildings and those buildings are no longer full because of a pandemic. What were they meant to do?
Just like my poor dad, guys with college degrees, but no common sense. You know what I mean? All the cities now count on taxes.
No common sense, but you won't tell them what they should do instead.
Commercial real estate starts closing. Our cities are going broke. You add to that pensions. Pensions, mark my words. I wrote my book called Who Stole My Pension? Pensions are going to be the biggest disaster hitting America and the world today.
And I was told, don't do that anymore because we'll kill you. My friend who was a doctor says they will. So that's what concerns me. I'm in for the freedom of speech.
This
and
is such
I agree
scaremonger.
when
My
people
freedom of
disagree.
speech is called
Everybody's got
bullshit
their own
on this.
opinion. But to threaten somebody with death and all that, that's a little too far.
Okay, so if you borrow money to then use that money to create wealth, why is that stupid? Now, if you go and spend all your money buying ice creams and leave them out in the sun and they all disappear down the drain, well, painting that is a stupid thing to do. But if you're doing something like, I don't know, let's say buying a car to become an Uber driver and make a ton of money doing Uber drives, that's not a terrible use of getting in debt. So, no, not a thing.
To know if they say something their advertisers don't do, they get shut down. So now these big newspapers, they are censored, determined by the advertisers.
That's always
Same
been
as
true.
Dr. Atkins, this carbohydrate revolution. And across the world, there's 2 billion old guys like me who have no money, and who's going to bail them out? And no Republican or Democrat is going to say we're not going to pay the old guys money.
By the way, if you want to talk about demographics, which kind of is what he's saying here, the people with the biggest problem on demographics? China, Japan, Italy, Germany, not the US. Now, don't get me wrong, most of the world other than Africa is not doing great from a demographics perspective. In other words, there's more old people than there is young ones, other than Africa. But the US is not even close to being at the front of that. And America's biggest international rival, if you want to call it that, is China. And half the population is over the age of 50. So they're the ones with the major issue from a demographics point of view rather than the US. But it sounds a lot better to scare young people in America.
So that means the old guys, they're going to say, you got to bail us out. And so naturally, they're going to print more money and pay the old guys just so they get reelected. So it's real estate taxes, it's small businesses going broke, it's income taxes going down, and pensions going down. So the Fed has to print more money. So that's why I keep saying buy gold, silver, and Bitcoin, because gold is getting more scarce.
No, it isn't. They keep digging more gold out of the ground. If their own image on the bloody screen now shows it. They are constantly digging up more gold, and if you can look on your screen now, there's an image that shows you that actually the gold price has been pretty steady. Well, no, not steady, but it's been wildly volatile over the last 100 years, but it's not a great deal more valuable than it was 100 years ago.
So let me explain why gold. So my prediction is gold in 1 year should be $3,000. That's about $1,000 more than it is today. So in a year, it should be up another 1,000. Some people say 2,500 is optimistic. But I'd rather have the price of gold going up than your money going down. So if you're saving money, I'll pray for you tonight, because your savings are actually real money. In other words, if you worked for it and you paid the taxes on that money you worked for, that's real legitimate money. Unfortunately, the Fed is printing trillions, and they're going to pay you nothing for your savings. I mean, when I was a kid, I got 15% on my savings.
Yeah, probably when inflation was about 15%, because you're not going to get 15% in your savings if inflation is 2%. That's just not a thing. That's never been a thing. He's just making this up.
Today, you get nothing. So the Fed is screwing you. That's the term. So I think gold at 3,000, not outside the box. Silver, $40. And the reason I like silver is silver's moving faster than gold today.
Actually, it isn't. Silver prices have been pretty flat for a very long time. They peaked at about $700 back in about 1981. So, again, it might go up, but there's nothing to suggest that it necessarily will. The idea that he doesn't like dollars is kind of amusing when he denominates all the other things in dollars, but whatever.
Silver used to be about $49, and today I think it's 18. So it's about 70% below its all-time high. So silver is the best deal of all, and I think most of you can afford a $20 silver coin. If you can't, you have deep problems. The reason I like Bitcoin is because what I understand about Bitcoin,
which frankly isn't very much by the looks of things.
Halving means they print less of it. At the same time, Bitcoin is printing less, the Fed is printing trillions. Now, you don't need a degree in rocket this high, and the Fed keeps printing more money, keeps giving the CEOs indirectly, because they can't do it directly. They do it through what's called SRVs, special something vehicle. And they give the CEOs the money and they pop the stock market up. That's why we're in serious trouble.
What? Who are these people? What could we have some names, some dates? Who's getting the money? It sounds, again, if you can't name a date or a person involved, then it's probably a conspiracy theory, probably made up, probably by you.
Well, freedom of speech doesn't mean we have to tell the truth. You see, just because when I read
No
a
kidding,
financial
mate.
from a stock company or for a company, and all this, they can lie. In fact, accounting is just not a lie, but one big distortion. You've got to understand how the numbers are making the story look good or making the story look bad.
Great. So now
Many real
you're now
estate
telling us you
investors,
can't
they'll
trust
actually
anything.
Take what's called a pro forma, which is, BS, blue sky.
Well, the people that'll get hammered, I'm writing this paper right now. It's taking me 4 months because it's a tough paper. It's called The Brave New World. And what this crisis represents is we're going into a brave new world. As I said in prophecy, I said it would come in 2016, but I didn't foresee. I started prophecy in 1999, but I didn't foresee quantitative easing and zero interest rates. I didn't foresee how desperate our leaders are, the Federal Reserve Bank, the Treasury, Wall Street, and even putting students in debt. I cannot believe how desperate people are. Everybody's so desperate because this world, starting from 1971, is so deeply in debt. The world
It's also enormously richer than it was in 1971. The world still had famines. 1971. Doesn't anymore. Well, apart from man-made ones like North Korea. So I don't know what he's talking about. Oh, I made this prediction or it didn't come true, but I didn't foresee. Well, maybe you didn't foresee any of it, mate. Because frankly, all of this just sounds like you're out there to clickbait and scare people.
the world's never going to be the same.
Because when Biden, when that commie Biden cut off the XL pipeline, the price of oil went through the roof.
I think I'm paying the lowest level of gas prices I have in maybe 10 years right now. I don't know why he called Biden a commie. It's a stupid statement. Doesn't tell you anything, does it? Anyway, meaningless. I mean, whether he should have turned off XL or not, debatable. But oil prices have not gone through the roof. In fact, they've been extremely well controlled over the last 10 years or so.
I was buying oil at $30 a barrel, or selling oil at $30 a barrel, and then it went to $130 a barrel. So I got really rich. But it wipes out everybody else. And
Well, what year was that, buddy?
that's why then Biden has the guts to blame Putin for it. I'm going, wait a minute. You're the guy that cut off the pipeline. This guy Biden is and if you understand how the dollar is created, you'd be at Vancouver, because 1944, the US dollar became the reserve currency of the world. What that is a thing called Triffin's dilemma. That means we're always short of dollars. So they have to keep printing. And they'll always print. The system is flawed. This is our time.
That doesn't make any sense. Because if the dollar were that, if everyone didn't want dollars, remember, it becomes a reserve currency because people see it as being a safe place to put their money, right? It isn't like it's voted in. So the pound was the reserve currency before, now the dollar is, and the reason that people take the dollar is that they have trust in it. That's why 60% of all the reserve currency on the planet is the US dollar. Second is the euro at 23%. So actually, the vast majority of the financial markets strongly believe that the dollar's a really good bet. So what he's saying is just meaningless. No.
All wars are about oil. What happened to Pearl Harbor, they bombed Pearl Harbor because Roosevelt cut off oil.
Yeah.
And they said, you screw you, we're going to bomb you.
Okay, that's not really true. What happened was that the Japanese signed up for the World Trade System, and then the Americans brought in protectionism, which said that you can't buy American oil anymore, and the Chinese realized they needed an empire, so they invaded China, Manchuria specifically, and did all sorts of horrific things. And to try and keep the Americans out of their sphere of influence, they bombed Pearl Harbor, which at the time, of course, was not part of the US. But he's sort of semi-right. Not certain you could say that the First World War was about oil or the Second World War was about oil. I mean, certainly it became important to run the war systems, but it wasn't. Germany did not invade Poland for oil.
So I watch what's happening in the Ukraine, and then Biden goes to Saudi Arabia, and then this was the biggest thing of all, Jay. I don't think anybody saw it. Saudi Arabia agreed to sell China oil and trade in the yuan, the Chinese currency.
I don't like the direction things are going, but I don't know of a currency that holds more influence on the global stage or that will.
I don't think people know the history of the dollar. It's a petrodollar. The U.S. dollar is what everybody trades, not only in food and stuff like that, but they traded oil in dollars. The moment that they start accepting yuan, I mean, why doesn't Biden, I guess his family does work for the Chinese government, don't they? But the point
Oh, that's right. This guy was going to be non-political. Now I remember.
Possession, one of the largest gold mines in the world, in world history.
By the way, I think we'll shove on screen now how much global oil is traded in yuan. I mean, the Russians and the Chinese are switching oil for gold. The Chinese are literally flying gold in planes to Moscow. So they're not using yuan or rubles or even dollars.
Resources are going to be your best investment, but it's also, in my opinion, the highest risk. It's the highest risk there is.
Right. So it's the best investment, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But it's also the highest risk. In other words, normal people, in other words, the vast majority of the people watching videos like this one probably shouldn't be doing it, because if you're a billionaire or close to it, you can risk $100 million. But if you've got $50,000, can you really risk that? Or would you prefer a more modest but not catastrophic failure?